We are ready to get started. Eddie, are you ready for me to make you the presenter?
Absolutely.
Okay. Here you go, sir.
Okay.
Perfect. I can see your slide deck perfectly. Thank you. Now we're ready to get started. For those of you new to ITSM Academy, here's a quick overview. ITSM Academy is a full-service provider of IT service management education. We develop all content in-house. That includes all ITIL education as well as process design, Agile, and DevOps. Since 2003, we've trained and certified tens of thousands of students. Now let me introduce you to Eddie Vidal. A few fun facts about Eddie. He's married, the father of 6, and is a Lego wannabe master builder. So that tells you a little bit about Eddie. He's also an independent consultant for EJV Corp, having just finished a consulting engagement for Scripps Health in San Diego. He is presently on a consulting engagement with the Memorial Healthcare System here in South Florida. Eddie is an international keynote speaker, an ITSMF podcast producer and jockey, and a 2014 ITSMF President's Award winner. Eddie has a lot of experience with HDI, including roles as founder and president emeritus in the South Florida HDI chapter, current member of the HDI Strategic Advisory Board at Fusion, an HDI conference track chair, and in 2016 an HDI Hall of Fame inaugural class inductee. Eddie is also published in HDI Support Work magazine. Good morning, Eddie.
Hey, good morning, Karen. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm honored for you all to ask me to present here, and hopefully by the end of this session, people will have information that they can take back to their organization and implement it, and hopefully we'll get a lot of Q&A so that we can have some great dialogue at the end.
Yes, I'm hoping for that as well. That'll be great. So don't forget to chat in your questions. So take it away, Eddie.
All right.
It's all yours.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks ITSM Academy for having me do this. It's been probably about 1.5 years or almost 2 years since I last joined you all. So I want to talk about the single point of contact, this journey that we had while I was at the University of Miami. And it's really interesting, Karen, like when you introduced me, and now I've been to 2 organizations since then, and not really a lot of differences. Every organization has their issues, and granted, I am not putting together a single point of contact, but a lot of the same issues are happening, and I'll probably share a little bit of that throughout my presentation. So to get started, I always wind up putting a picture of my family. I try to find a way to incorporate them in some way, shape, or form. Like Karen said, I'm a father of 6 kids. We have a blended family, and it's like a virtual team. You can't get everybody in the picture at the same time. And that's no different from your service desk organizations. If you decide to go into a single point of contact, it doesn't mean that they all have to be in one location, but you want a channel of entry for all your user base, and you want to be able to do that. And same with my family and my kids. I try to share with them the same values, and we try to have our dinners together, but I don't really have a good analogy in this presentation, but I always want to be able to show my family while I present. It tells you a little bit about who you are. So what is it that we're going to talk about? I hope that when we're done with this presentation, you're going to be able to understand the road that we traveled. You're going to understand what we did. It's not about IT, and it's not about how we think things are going to be better. It's that whatever changes you decide to do, what value are you adding to your customer, to your organization, and to your team? In the last 2 engagements that I've worked at, I'm helping implement ServiceNow. And it's a tool, and the thing is, your end user and your customer base really don't care how you go about it or what tool you use. At the end of the day, they want to know, well, what is it going to do to them? How is it going to make their life better? And so with this road that we've traveled, we always have to have that in the back of our mind. I'll share with you about some wins, some milestones, also some celebrations, and of course, I don't know about anyone listening on this call, but I've learned more from my mistakes than I have from my successes, and we had a couple bumps on the road. When I do this presentation, I've done it in person, and I ask a couple of these questions. Hopefully, you're on this webinar because you've maybe done something similar, or you've gone through something similar, and maybe you're going to learn how we did it. You're thinking about doing the same thing. Maybe you are a service desk manager, and if none of those three apply, then my question to you is, why are you here? But hopefully, you'll still get something out of it. Another reason why I decided to share and do this is because I gained so much from hearing other individuals and other people that have implemented things in their organization. I learned so much because I can bring that back and implement it where I'm at. The thing about when I talked about the value to the customer, some of the other things that we brought, we showed better service times, better answer times. We need to understand as a service desk, and maybe I'll get an argument for those that manage desktop support, but I feel that the service desk is the face of IT. And the success that the service desk provides makes the entire IT organization look good. Some of the things that we also were able to win from this is that the knowledge within the team grew because we had to train them and do some cross-training, which I'll talk about. People had to adapt to changes. We had some career opportunities and some more exposure for individuals. And the way that we look at it is little wins or little changes were wins. So no matter what we did, we tried to celebrate along the way. So this is our journey. We talked about combining several service desks into one. We had several. We had clinical support, which was located at a medical campus. We had academic support, and we had technical support. At the time, we were only a 9-to-5 shop, but we moved to a 24/7 shop. And think about this. When you support academic institutions in higher ed, you have a lot of students. And a lot of times they're calling after hours, and before that academic support desk closed at 6 o'clock, so they really had nowhere to go to. So now we had students that were international, students that were working at night, or those that wanted to get on their Xbox and the network, calling us, and we were able to provide support to them. I also mentioned that we were able to create career paths for all team members. We were able to utilize and cross-train many of our team members. So some of them came into this change only knowing academic support. We were able to help them, or it really helped us in the organization by cross-training them and having them learn about the clinical applications and be able to support our hospital. We were able to lower abandon rate with ACD call menu changes, which allowed us to increase our service level. And what was really interesting about the call menu that we created is we were able to create scalability to roll out large projects like Workday, which is a human capital management system. Just to show you the number of customers that we had or the number of users that we supported, we had about 14,000 faculty, admin, and staff, 16,000 students, and about 171 alumni. This is no different than some of the organizations that I'm currently helping right now, and they've all been in the 10 to 15,000 employee range. So this road that we took, I think, will help for large organizations, and I'm sure they would help for smaller organizations too. So what we have here is this. I call this the BS model, and the BS model is before single point of contact. And if you see, everything is very distributed. And so when we started, the way that we had it is, I talked about the academic, clinical, and technical support. These are the number of individuals that we had on our team. We had 6 academic resources, 10, and 4 clinical. But it wasn't just a service desk answering calls. We also had system admins, we had a tier 2 support, and ultimately we had the data center come in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how the data center came to play, whether they were to help us, whether they were able to help us or not. So the thing about doing this journey, there's a lot of moving pieces. And I like to use the Lego analogy. So the way that we did this is we eventually migrated and had everybody in one location. But before that, we had people in 2 different locations. And we were growing because new projects were coming on board. We were moving from 2 active directories. We were moving or merging into one. We were merging Exchange to one server, and then we were moving to the cloud. And so what happened is we were bringing in contractors along the way. And we actually ran out of space at the medical campus. So what we did is we decided that we needed to move some people over to the academic side, which was at the Coral Gables campus, and that was eventually where we were going to be all located. So the thing is, I go, okay, well, let's move 2 resources. And you wonder, well, who are the 2 that you should move? And a lot of people would respond, well, probably your most trustworthy or the ones that have the most experience. Well, yeah, those are a couple of answers. But another thing is, like, do I have some leaders that are self-motivated, that I don't have to stay on top of them to say, hey, answer calls? Or were they individuals that had respect within our organization, and they were the most senior individuals, and I was sorry to see them leave over there. But the thing is, those were the individuals that can adapt to change even easier than others. So that was very important that I decided, well, look, let me finally pick 2 individuals that can adapt to that. What was interesting is when we moved those individuals over there, we were still having different call menus, and we would eventually put the call menu together. And you may ask, well, was working remotely an option too? Can we have some people working from home and being some virtual agents? Unfortunately, in that environment that I was in, that was not an option. And it depends on your organization and your culture. In my current organization here at Memorial Health, they have some virtual agents. But for a lot of locations, they're not really ready for that, or they haven't tried that. So what would happen is that we had these 2 individuals over there at the academic side, and the academic individuals were getting these technical support calls. And what would happen is that they couldn't handle that call, and they would say, well, you need to call back this number or transfer it to another number. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what doesn't make sense there? I go, you have 2 individuals from this team that you can just walk over to and ask them these questions and start learning and start doing some cross-training. So it was an education, or it was sort of like you had to knock them over the head to say, hey, listen, start thinking outside of your 4 walls. Start thinking about the bigger picture. You have individuals there on that team that can help you. We did this 24/7 support in July of 2014, and previous to that, the data center had tried to, the data center individual or that team joined our organization under the service desk. And so going to that 24/7 support model, you're thinking, oh, there's a few individuals there that may be able to help us answer those calls at night and on weekends. Well, I don't know about you. In previous organizations that I've been at, those individuals have probably been in those positions 10, 15, 20 years. And now I'm making a generalization here, and I'm just speaking from experience. The team members that we had there did not professionally develop themselves. They did not keep growing their careers. So when we tried to have them help us with troubleshooting technical support issues, it didn't work out. When we tried to have them help us with password resets and things like that, that was a little bit helpful, but not much. So we realized that, hey, this wasn't going to work. So we went sort of to plan B. Plan B was, okay, how many people do we need to hire? Where do we start? What type of skill set are we going to have? It's very difficult to find somebody that has a skill set for everything that we were looking for, academic, clinical, and technical support. Don't get me wrong, they're out there, but it's not like they're a dime a dozen. So what was interesting is, and what I've really learned about this throughout my professional career and being very involved with HDI and ITSM and a couple other organizations out there, is that I reached out to individuals and say, hey, have you done this before? And maybe one or two people are listening and they're going about the same process and they want to learn how I did it. So I was lucky enough to find someone at a Fusion conference, and they went through the same thing. And I learned on how they created their schedule with their resources and implemented a work-life balance. So that was really, really helpful. We decided to put 3 shifts together, and the way that we did it is we wanted to do that work-life balance, so we made sure that at least they had 1 day off during the week. We did a lot of cross-training. We said, okay, we're going to be doing this physical move, and then what was really interesting along the way is the physical move was going to take place. We knew that, but that was still probably about 12 months away. But we decided to create this one call menu tree to combine everything. And my boss at the time said, no, let's not do this. And I thought, you know what, we need to do this. And I put a plan in place, and I'm going to share that. But we did that before. And so talking about that plan, let me just show you a high-level timeline of what we did. as we became one unit in December of 2012. This in February of 2013 is when I moved over to the medical campus. So my role changed within the University of Miami like 3 times. And I started over there in that organization, and I didn't really know anybody. And it was a brand new team that was reporting to me. So I had to adapt, just like I've had in my last several engagements. I've had to adapt to new cultures. I may have a lot of experience and have been successful, but I can't come in there and make these changes right off the bat. I need to understand a little bit about the organization and make some of these changes gradually. As you can tell, not only that, we had the service desk manager at the academic campus retire, and that's when it all started happening. And then the data center team started reporting to the service desk. In July of 2014, that's when we went live with a 24/7 support. We put in the call menu tree, and I'm going to go over that in December of 2014. And we went ahead and did an ERP rollout of Workday in April 2015. And in June of 2015, we were finally in one location. So you asked the question, well, how do we do this? We had to do a lot of cross-training. It's not that easy. And what was really interesting is we had to put something in place. And so when we brought in these 6 people, we had to bring them in place before we actually went 24/7 go live with that call menu tree. And the thing is, in some organizations, it depends on your maturity. How fast, when you bring in a new individual, can you get them up and running? Well, if we had a really strong knowledge base, I think that we could have done it a lot quicker, but our knowledge base was very weak at that time. We supported over 500 apps, and what would happen is sometimes we'd get a call about an app which we really didn't know. It was not in our knowledge base, so that happened few and far between. So those are some issues that we encountered along the way. On the academic side, we also did we did chargebacks. For the telecom side, for phones and for moves, adds, and changes, we did a lot of billbacks or chargeback, and the individuals that were coming over from the medical campus and had the technical expertise did not have that. So one of the things that we decided when we set up our call menu is to not put those individuals to handle those type of calls. And then what's really interesting is, like, some organizations are very organized, some have project plans put in place. This is our project plan, and I'm being facetious when I say this. We just start a lot of whiteboard sessions and we start putting things together, and this is how we learned how we needed to do some things. This is just one example of what we did, and this goes to show you how we decided to create a call menu tree and some of the things that we had to do. But we did get a little bit more organized, and the reason I say that is that when you make all these changes and you're running a service desk, you have all these call menu options, and you start creating these skill group options, and we created a skills group matrix. And this was really important on the way that we did this, because it showed us, hey, we had some weaknesses. We were putting this all together, and we go, oh, goodness, we're going to have to train people on this skill group. And that's what helped us move along on how we had to do things. So we submitted this matrix to the programmers. This helped us determine if we had the right coverage and when. And we realized, like I said, we had a couple of weak areas. You have to understand that we still had mainframe systems in place, and we were still getting calls for that. And we had to document a lot more processes that we really struggled through because we were not a mature organization. So what I want to share with you is who we are and where we're at in the numbers. So back in 2014, we had 55,000 emails. And the reason I'm sharing these numbers with you is because I'm going to show you the improvements along the way. We had almost 200,000 calls, and if you look at our abandon rate, a little bit over 13%. Not a great number. There's a lot of organizations that have them a lot lower. I've spoken to some service desk managers where they were higher, and this goes to show you where we're at. Our average speed to answer and our service level is there. Our service level meant that what percent of our calls we answered within 60 seconds. So at that time, it was 54%. I want to share with you what we did for our call menu tree, and you look at it and it's like, oh, this is large. Why so many? What was interesting is when we had the call menu tree at the medical campus, our option number 1 was technical support. And I don't know about you, how many times do you call your credit card company, or any time you call a call center Do you listen to the call menu tree? How many times do you press 0 or do you press 1? And so what was happening is that people were pressing 1 and it was going to our most skilled individuals. And most of our calls and industry standards show that you're going to receive about 30% of your calls for password resets. On top of that, you were getting a lot of callbacks on status of information. You were getting general information type questions. So that's why we decided that when we created this call menu tree, we made that option 1. And another thing that allowed us and gave us an advantage of this is by making that option number 1, when you bring in new people on board and you can assign them just this one skill group, our average ramp-up speed was much quicker. So I had somebody be able to answer calls probably within 2 weeks because, yeah, granted, they'd have some struggles if they had some general information type questions about our organization and our culture. But if we gave them access to the right systems to reset passwords, they were able to help us right away. Option 2 was biomedical support, and that didn't even come to our service desk, and I wanted to remove that at the time. But in order for this project to move forward and we had deadlines, I just left that on there. Option 3 was our telecom support. That was more of the academic support, our ID cards, our access to systems and things like that. Option 4 was more of a research system. That did not come to our team, but we still had to keep it on there. And moving forward, some of these options were going to be removed. Option 5 was our clinical support. And that's where we had we used Epic over there, and that's where we had a lot of calls based on that, and we were able to bring in new individuals and answer calls on that skill group. At the beginning of this presentation, I talked about scalability, and this is where we were able to do it. When we did the Active Directory project and the Office 365 project, we brought in resources, and we just had them answer that skill group. But as they learned more about our organization and became more technical, then it allowed me to add them to other skill groups. The rest, as you can tell, is self-explanatory. And then when we rolled out Workday, we added a different option, option number 9. And what happens is in our organization, not every single call was documented. We probably got up to about 90% of the calls that were documented with either incidents or requests. But by using a call menu tree and being able to run reports off my ACD, I was able to at least share with the management team, the organization, how many calls were coming in. And what was really interesting is before the Workday project came on board, we brought in 7 temp resources. We were able to go live day 1, and our abandon rate was at 4%. And one of the things that you have to concern yourself about is when you bring in resources for projects, you have to make sure that you don't lose that knowledge. And we were really fortunate because we had some growth and we had some individuals on our team leave for other organizations. So we were able to retain that knowledge and that talent and use those individuals moving forward. What was interesting about our project is as we did this change, where is the communication? How are you communicating this to your end user? And talking to my management team at the time, I felt that we needed to do communication. And as you can tell by me putting this little banner in, we did no communication. We decided that this was an internal change, that it really wasn't going to be much of an effect, that people would call and they would listen to the menu. And I kept saying, are you sure? And there's a lot of times, I'm sure, in your career that you wanted to communicate or you wanted to share something that you felt was the right approach. And your management team decided, hey, look, we're not going that way. And you have to learn to accept it and you move on. But what was really interesting is because we decided not to go with communication, we started running some reports. And we ran a report, and this is just a sample of our report. Our number 1 call was call transfer. And so my management team kept coming back and saying, well, Eddie, what can we do about this? And I'm thinking to myself, duh, well, why don't we, I know it's after the fact, but why don't we start some communication? Why don't we start sharing with our end user community what we were doing or what we have done? Because if you look at some of the things that we were trying to do, some of the things that we were trying to do is we wanted to reduce the number of calls that were either call transfers or just basically call transfers. And what happened is that we wanted to be able to communicate these changes, and this is actually what we did. we did a couple things. We created this flyer on the left. It's just a basic flyer, and we were able to put this on our web page. We were also able to put this on the elevators in some of the buildings. We were able to send it out via email. We used a collaboration tool called Yammer. We also created a newsletter and put that in there. And then on the IT website, we added that on the slide deck at the beginning where you have your news and notes and things like that. So based on that information, we felt that that call volume would go down for call transfer. And it did at first, and I'm going to be able to show you some numbers. So based on all these changes, we talk about who we are. And we became a 24/7, 365-day shop. We did clinical, technical, and academic support. But let me share with you who we became. We also became a group of individuals. At the time when we had 26 individuals, and we did 20 people, because of these changes, were able to answer password general information type calls. We had 7 individuals answer workday calls. We had a number of 10 individuals answer technical support calls. And as you can see, what happened is we had 4 individuals for clinical support. So as I keep moving along, I want to share with you some of the numbers and some of the changes that we benefited from doing this. So now because of this change and having the cross-training, having the people hired, we had all 26 individuals at one time be able to answer password and general information type questions. Keep in mind, we had a call center or a call skill type application. We used Exony and we used the Cisco voice over IP. And unfortunately at the time it was manual. So when we had certain skill groups had a lot of calls on hold or long answer times, we manually were able to change individuals. And that just helped us handle that skill group. If you also notice, we were able to bring everybody on board to do workday support. We had people come in on the weekends for some cross-training or some training from the training team. We were able to increase the number of individuals on each of these skill groups for not only the technical skill group, project, academic, and clinical. So it helped us be able to do all this. So these are some added benefits that we were able to gain. And at the end of the day, like I started at the beginning of the presentation, this was the value that we were adding to our customers. Let's look at some other numbers. Look at the numbers that we did for emails. Our numbers for emails and our calls went up year over year. Our call answers also went up. But look at the number of abandoned calls. It went down. Look at our abandon rate. It went down 11.2% to 11.2%. Our average speed to answer went down, and our service level went up. So based on all these changes with the call menu tree, based on the cross-training, based on doing all those little changes that we did, we were able to improve the numbers and show value to our end user community. Then here it is based on percentages of changes. And you know what? If you look at the abandon rate going down from 13 to 11, it may not seem like much, but that's almost a 16% improvement. And if you look at our average speed to answer, that was a 22% improvement. And then I didn't have this on the previous slide, but our first call resolution also went up because we did a lot of these changes, and I felt that it was effective. And our first call resolution went up by 5%. So when I talk about numbers, this is value that you can show your senior management. This is value that you can show in numbers to your end users. Some of the values that we talked about also is career path. So what I was able to do is, like I mentioned before, some of the skill groups had a lot of calls on hold. We were able to change individuals on the fly. We were able to have new employees contribute at a much faster rate than before. We were able to scale for some of these projects, and it allowed us to continue growing and bring in new projects on board. And it helped us that we were able to bring in temporary resources. And we were also able to move individuals to other shifts. What's really interesting is when we had the third shift team, we had one individual that left the organization, and we had another individual that was going on vacation. And it's not like you can tell them, no, I'm sorry, you can't go on vacation. But what really ended up happening is I had an individual there who wanted to learn more about clinical support, and little by little he started learning these, the skill set. And when I was going to have no coverage on third shift, I reached out to him and I say, hey, listen, would you like to cover third shift for a week while this guy is on vacation? Because everybody wants to be able to work third shift because it was a little bit of extra money. But the reason I gave this individual the ability to do that is, well, number one, of course, he liked the money and he needed the money because his wife was pregnant with triplets. But I told him, I go, the reason I'm giving this to you is because you reached out and you were committed and you wanted to learn more, and you took the action and initiative to do that. So I was able to bring that person and help us with third shift while I needed some coverage. So those are the things that I talked about there. One of the other advantages of us going to a single point of contact in one location is we were able to have team meetings. And it was difficult before, and you really can't have a team meeting all at once if you run a service desk because you can't pull everybody off the phone. But we were able to have meetings on the same day. We'd have one in the morning and one in the afternoon. But what was also great is that we were able to bring in some guest speakers. We brought in the CIO. We would bring in the chief security officer. We were able to not only, when we were ramping up for these projects, bring in the people, the subject matter experts from the different groups to come in and give us the training, to give us the documentation, to have us prepare for these rollouts, whether it was the Office 365 rollout, whether it was Workday or not. We were able to do all that. Another thing is you have to think about change, and change is not easy. It's a lot on your culture. And so when we did this change, I started talking to them about 8 to 10 months prior. You can't just come in a couple of weeks prior and say, hey, this is what's happening. I would ask these questions. Well, now that the IT departments have merged, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think it would make sense that we would combine our service desks? And you'd get some responses. And little by little, I would discuss these things at all these meetings because I was preparing them. And little by little, I was also having them come up with ideas on how we were going to benefit with this change. And it wasn't a one-way street. It wasn't management coming in and saying, hey, this is the way it's going to go. It was a collaborative effort. And when you make change and you have them participate in the change, you get easier buy-in. And to be honest with you, when we put these two teams together, the cultural and the way that they work was very, very different. But it also helped that we were able to bring people in a little bit earlier and have them adapt to those changes and have them become part of that culture. This is just goes to show you the number of projects that we were working on at the time. And just this is like any organization. You're working on 1,000,001 things, but we did several things. Like I said, we did Active Directory, and then we rolled out to Office 365. We were doing an identity management, single sign-on and dual authentication. We were using Oracle Identity Management for that. We did Workday, and then the last thing that we were going to be doing before I left there is we were moving everything to the cloud for storage. So and the thing about that, I think that was going to cause a lot of calls because it's a different way of doing business for them. They were used to using shared drives. They were used to using SharePoint, and we were going to allow different cloud services based on whether you were a student, you were faculty, or you were staff. So that was going to be very interesting going forward. Some of the tools that we use, just to let you know, we use ServiceNow as our incident management tool. We use Cisco, Voice over IP, or IPCC. We were using the knowledge base in SharePoint at the time. It was going to move to ServiceNow. Some of the training that we had to do to get up to speed, I talked a little bit about that. We did that Saturday session for Workday because that was a several hour, that was a half-day training. So we paid some overtime and we brought in some lunch for the team. We also had those guest speakers. We did lynda.com. We used Skillsport as a tool. As we continued growing, there was individuals on our team that were becoming HDI Support Center Analyst certified. So that really, really helped us. And we started developing an internal wiki board on our knowledge base, and we had people collaborate, and the team started submitting knowledge-based documents which would help us grow and become more knowledgeable. I had more engagement and more participation by the team. The other thing that's really interesting is you start looking at call volume and you start making some changes. And what I find interesting is not only did I do this at the University of Miami, but when I started working at Scripps Health, they had issues with their abandon rate. And what I noticed is that their call volume was really high, just like in most organizations on Monday. But what was interesting is most of the people that they had off on their schedule was on a Monday too. And most of our call volume came in between 8 and 10 in the morning, and they didn't have enough coverage during that time, so we started moving people around. And to me, this is basic management of a help desk organization. Is you have to look at where your volume is, and you have to move around your people to match that. And so I have a couple ITIL certifications and things like that, but when I shared this with a management team and I shared this with an ITIL expert, he goes, well, Eddie, you just did demand management and capacity management. And I go, really? Oh, that's great. And sometimes it's not about the titles and the name of the processes, is you're actually doing the processes, and maybe you're calling them something different in your organization. And if you're working in a lean or an agile environment, I know that you use the word Scrum. Well, in my organization and some of the things that I did for this team, I just call them daily huddles. So whatever terminology you're using and whatever you're doing, it's a lot of the same basic best practices and guidelines that you have out there. This is just another screen to show you. If you start putting a picture to what you're trying to explain to your team and you show them where your call volume is based on a picture, they're more apt to understand and be able to adapt to the changes. And a lot of times during the meetings when they saw this, they go, oh, that makes sense. Maybe we need to put more people during those times. And that's how I was able to achieve, I think, faster buy-in. Some of the goals you ask, well, how does this team work, and what are the goals that you have for an organization? And I'm always using this principle about keeping it simple. It's like you don't want to overwhelm people with reports and numbers. It's like, well, how much do you need just to be able to meet your goals and to know that you're making a difference and you're adding value to the customer? So we had 5 basic goals. Basically, your not ready time, we needed to do that because that not ready time allows you to lower abandon rate, increase your average speed to answer, increase your service levels. So that was a really important goal for the team. And these people are not machines. They're there for 8.5 hours a day. They take lunch of about 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on how they wanted to do it. So really they had 7.5 hours of time that they can be productive. But they're not robots and they're not available, and they had after call work, and they go to meetings and they go to the restroom. So the way that I did it is if you worked 6 hours, which is 70% of your work schedule, you needed to be either ready or you needed to be on a call. And that was probably the biggest and #1 goal that I managed to. And I had to bring people in to talk to them and tell them, hey, you're not meeting this goal. And sometimes I had several sit-downs with individuals to do that. I also had them create knowledge-based articles, and it's not like I had them create a whole bunch of them. I go, give me 1 per quarter. Let's start there. And some people just didn't do it, and you had to work with them, and you had to tell them, hey, this is the value behind it. If you're putting some articles out there, it's helping the rest of the team. We also did some call monitoring. We would listen to some calls, and we would grade those. I have other presentations on doing some quality assurance and looking at call monitoring. And we also did some professional development. I think professional development is important. I use this phrase that professional development sometimes is not between the hours of 9 to 5. And if you're an organization that allows professional development during those times, then consider yourself lucky. But in order for us to continue growing in our careers, when I work on this presentation, it's on my own time. If I want to go get my master's degree, I'm more than likely not doing it during my working hours. And then the last thing we did is we wanted to make sure that we were opening up the number of incidents based on our call volume. And depending on your organization, some are very immature, and that's not there. And we had to, at first, it was weak, to be honest with you. And then we set the goal at 80, and each year we were going to increase that by 5%. But when you're setting goals, you want them to be reachable too. So what are some of these lessons learned? Well, we learned that we needed to communicate changes in advance. You noticed that our call transfer and the type of calls that we had were high at first, so we noticed that we needed to communicate. The other thing that I really learned from this, and I did it to some extent, and I see where it was successful, is that you need to involve the team from the beginning. Get them going, get them involved, let them be part of the solution. Some of the things that I was still working on before I left is at Not Ready time, like I had mentioned before, I had to have several sit-downs with them. Also, the cross-training, we wanted to get people to be able to answer all skill groups. We wanted to continue increasing our knowledge base articles because we wanted to become more mature and then eventually get those knowledge base articles out to the public and have more level 0 and more self-service support. We also noticed that we had long hold times for clinical support on the weekends, and this is where we needed to get those computer operators involved and have them answer the calls, even if it's just to say, hey, look, we're aware that you're on hold. Let me try to help you as best as we can. If not, let me take a message and we'll have someone call you back instead of having hold times of 10 or 15 minutes. And then we had to look at customer surveys. We had them. We were sending them out, but we weren't doing anything about them. So we had to make sure that we would take advantage of what the feedback was from our customer base. I mean, the worst thing in the world is that you're giving us feedback and we're not doing anything about it. And then the turnover. We were turning over some people, but like Stephen Covey says, you need to continue sharpening the saw. So moving forward, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Or, well, I think I did. I saw that call volume has decreased over the past month and a half. I saw that the projects that we had worked on, it was a big impact in our organization, and we noticed that we were able to handle this. We also, I think, in IT really need to learn that when we are doing projects, it's not all about us, it's about the customer. And we need to find ways that the impact to them is less. And the projects are benefiting the customer, not us. So we also have to worry about those cloud projects. And I always ask this question, what's in it for me? If I'm the end user, what are they gaining or what are they getting by making these changes and the changes that we did to try to become a single point of contact? Once again, I want to thank Karen and I want to thank ITSM Academy for allowing me to present. I was talking to Karen before, I'm glad you want me to do this. I'm humbled. I hope that I met your goal and objective. And if there's any questions, or Karen, if you want to take over, now is the time.
Thank you, Eddie. That was a fabulous presentation with lots of great information. And I absolutely love the fact that you manage by fact. Love it. Absolutely love the data. That's important for me, so thank you. I appreciate that. Before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to do a couple of things. One, ask if anybody has questions for Eddie. If you can start chatting them in now, that would be great. And I wanted to remind everybody that the next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, October 20th, when Matt Hooper, he's an IT service management evangelist at Landesk Software, is going to be joining us. And Matt's presentation is titled, Preparing Your Organization for Digital Business. And Matt says that all facets of the business demand innovation from Matt says that all facets of the business demand innovation from IT, but preparing for it requires scope, timing, vision, understanding the competitive landscape, and innovative business processes. This will require new roles, new approaches to funding special projects, value-based metrics, and controls to ensure that the shifts aren't seismic. In this session, we'll look at examples of businesses that used big data and analytics, mobile, social media, IoT, or other disruptive technologies to revolutionize their business model. And Matt will also provide steps that can assist you in your journey. So we hope that you can join us for that. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Eric Montijo. Eric, are you there?
I sure am. How you doing today, Karen?
I'm doing great. How'd you like the presentation?
I thought this presentation was absolutely fantastic. Eddie, thank you so much for coming to join us today and talking about single point of contact. I think that's I think it's an interesting concept. I really enjoyed it. And you know, kind of feeding back into it, you talked a lot about reorganization and recreating processes and procedures. That kind of brings to mind one of our classes that talks a lot about that, and that's Certified Process Design Engineer. So if any of this kind of resonated with you and you want to learn more about what Eddie talked about today, I would really suggest taking a Certified Process Design Engineer course with us at CPDE. And actually right now we're running a special with it register in this class and you get a free seat in our innovative new minimal viable ITSM class. It's actually a workshop. All you have to do is just add both into the cart. The discount is applied in the cart, and we make it really easy for you. We do have a class coming up in October, and we'd love to see you there. So if you have any questions about that, there's going to be a link coming up in the chat. You can also chat, email, or call us anytime about it. I'm happy to help you, and we look forward to seeing everybody in class. Eddie, again, thank you so much for coming to be with us today, and back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Eric. I have just a question, a general question, not for you, Eddie, just a general one from Mohab. He's asking, is this being recorded? And yes, this presentation is being recorded, and it will be made available to you in just a day or two. So just to let you know that. And Eddie, I don't have any questions other than that. So I just want to ask the group one more time. We've got a few minutes with Eddie here, so if you'd like some more clarification or have any questions, please feel free to do that now. And I wanted to remind you that we will continue to bring you practitioner presentations discussing Agile and IT service management, implementation experiences, and your challenges. So people want to hear, you want to hear, and learn from the practitioner experiences yourself. If you'd like to share your implementation experience or implementation challenges, or if you have a presentation that you'd like to share with us and our listeners, just please let me know, and I'd be happy to work with you to make that happen at one of our monthly web vacations. And I've got a lot of accolades for you. Great presentation, thank you so much, and most informative. Lots of information we can use. So
well, it's all about sharing. I mean, I'm humbled to hear that, and sometimes I think, oh, am I making any sense, or is this adding any value? But at the end of the day, all I did is share my story, and a lot of people can do the same thing, and we learn from each other.
Right, because you told us about your successes, and also you told us about areas that weren't as successful or that you thought could have been more successful. And it's really always a give and take, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, if we knew it all, we wouldn't be here, would we?
Right? No, we would not be here. That's right. Now, Joyce has a question for you. When you moved service desks together, were they all using the same model beforehand and the same tools?
Well, I'm going to answer the second part of tools. Yes, model, if she can be a little bit more specific. But basically, I mean, there was different cultures, and they had different processes, and they supported different customers. But when it came to all the tools, whether it was the phone system, the ITSM tool, and the knowledge base, yes, it was all the same tool.
Okay, and Joyce, thank you, Eddie. And Joyce qualified the model beforehand, and she's saying, did you use the same metrics, same reporting structures for model?
Well, they probably had a couple of different metrics that they would share with their management team, though it wasn't something that was out of the ordinary, because what was interesting on the academic side, they did more service requests or request fulfillment versus the medical side. So they were reporting on that, but when we merged all together, then we just incorporated it and created one dashboard for everything. So maybe there were a couple minor tweaks, but nothing major.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. And had that much impact.
Well, keep in mind, it was still at where I was at the University of Miami. It was just different campuses. It was different IT organizations. But I mean, if I walk in right now to these two organizations that I've worked in the past, and I can take a dashboard that I've created before and sort of compare it to, I would say at least, maybe, and I would hope 60 to 80% of it are the same metrics. You may have some individual metrics based on your organization. And we have to keep in mind that a lot of times our metrics are more internal for us, and we have to find ways to make these metrics valuable to the customer. Are you being transparent? Are you sharing it with them? And a lot of organizations are not that mature yet to do that. And I hope that where I'm at here today to be able to do that. And I haven't been successful in the sense to get to that maturity level where I've been at before, but that's where I want to be able to build organizations that I go to, show the transparency and show those metrics. And those metrics are going to be almost similar to any location or any organization that I go to, or anybody that's listening to this call.
Right, right. Thank you. Joyce said thanks. That was perfect. That's what she was looking for. John is asking, can you say a few words about the process and mechanism for escalation of issues and requests to second or third line support?
So if there's a couple of things that you can look at. So a regular incident, and I'm going to just go with the incident model. If it came in, if it's something that we couldn't handle, we would send it to a tier 2 or tier 3 or level 3 within our tool. We had certain operating level agreements and service level agreements that if they weren't being met, we would be able to look at that based on reports. But I'll tell you, in a mature organization, a lot of times you're getting the customer to call us back and saying, hey, what's the status of this incident? And you want to really try to avoid that. And so if you have good OLAs and SLAs, that'll reduce those type of calls. Also, if you have a self-service portal where they can go out there and see what the status of their incident is, you are able to avoid those calls. But the thing is, you have to have these, you have to create these operating level agreements with these different groups within your organization. Overall, to me, it's a cultural thing. What are the expectations of your entire IS or IT organization? What are the service levels that you've provided? Are there priorities defined? Or does everybody in your organization know that if they're meeting them, and if they're not, are they being held accountable for it? So it's more than just a basic, well, how is our process escalating to a second or third level tier? And that's just for incident. If we're talking major incident where now you need to create a conference call, you need to notify people, you need to maybe put a message on your automated attendant, or you need to put a message out there. So that's more about escalations and getting other people involved. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is based on what's the culture that you have in your organization and what are the expectations, and are you being held accountable? Because you can run reports till you're blue in the face and they're just showing up in red, but if you're not doing or managing to them and doing your continual service improvement, you're really not moving forward. Hopefully that answered John's question. Because I threw in a lot of other stuff in there too.
Yeah, yes, but important information. John, if you have anything more specific, please just chat it back in with us, please. I've got a couple more questions for you. Lisa wants to know if you'd like to share the HDI podcast information with us, and she can chat that out to the listeners.
Oh, you mean the ITSMF stuff?
Yes.
I can send is at Lisa Schwartz or anybody. If you reach out to me, my email's on this one, and I'll go ahead and share those links. I don't have like a website. I have a lot of them on Bright Talk, and a lot of them are on Apple iTunes. So basically, I'm a little bit disorganized in that. It's all over the place, but I can send links out.
Well, you know what we'll do, Eddie, is we'll put them on the bottom of the Q&A report, so that when everybody gets the Q&A report, they'll all get it. Everybody that's here today will be able to have that information. So thank you for that. And Gloria wanted me to tell you that she thought it was an excellent presentation, and she thought your materials were excellent as well. And I think that has a lot to do with those metrics that you were using there.
Tell Gloria the check is in the mail.
You heard it, Gloria.
Thank you.
And Adam has a question. He said, how would you recommend seating arrangements among the different tier members? Is that important?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It was interesting. Oh, that's a good question. So I was at Scripps, and they were moving to a new location. And like I mentioned before, you want them to help you make decisions. So we allowed them to choose the kind of desks that they wanted and the layout that they wanted. And they came back with the old cubicles all in a row versus these collaborative cubicles now that you have in pods. They're in like pods of anywhere from 4 to 6 individuals. So that's what we did at the University of Miami. And at Scripps, when we were going to move to the new location, we went back and we overruled the team and said, hey, look, we took all your suggestions into consideration, but we're going with the pod environment because we feel that it adds to collaboration. And so to answer his question is, yeah, we put together the people that were doing most of the academic support in one area. We had anybody that was working on tier 2 or were system admins, they sat together. So we grouped them together, and that worked for us. It may not work for you, but if you have that cubicle environment, that's harder to do. If you had that pod desk environment, that's a great thing to do, and I highly encourage and recommend it.
Thank you, Eddie. Let me ask you, When you overruled the team, how did they react to that?
Well, you don't want, if you have kids, you don't want to say just because, or because I said so. I shared with them, at the beginning I go, just keep in mind, these are recommendations and suggestions by you all. And more than likely, if it makes sense, we're going to go with what you said. But if not, you have to come back and explain to them why. And the thing is, the first time they came back with that, and then I shared information with them, I showed them diagrams, I gave them some analysis. I also asked them, did you guys at least do any research? Did you go and talk to any other organizations? Did you do and look online? And they said no. And I go, well, here's some material. They went back, they looked at it, they digested it, and they still came back and said no. And I was trying to push them towards that answer. And then at the end I said, look, I'm looking at you. When I sit in your area, I don't see collaboration. I don't see people getting up and talking to each other. Granted, you may use Microsoft Link or Communicator or whatever instant messaging tool or collaborative tool you use, you can talk to them. But I like to see people get up and talk, because when you're not on the phone, that allows you to talk and build more of a team. You may want to get up and talk to somebody else to get some more help. So I shared all those examples with them, and I think there was acceptance. But you have to understand, in that culture where I was at, there was a lot of individuals on that team that had been there for several years. And I think that they sort of overruled the younger generation. But at the end, in my opinion, they accepted our decision.
Okay, good. Well, I think it was helpful that you gave them information to go and look, since they hadn't done any research on their own.
I think that helped. It didn't sway them, but at least it showed that other people, and there's other ideas out there besides what they came up with.
Yes, you showed a lot of initiative in that project.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is all the questions that I have. And Adam said thank you very much for providing that information on the recommended seating arrangements on the tiers. So he said thank you very much for that. Does anybody else have any other questions? Now's the time to bring that in. And while you're doing that, I just want to remind you once again that our next webinar is October 20th, when Matt Hooper, IT Service Management Evangelist at Landesk Software, joins us with his presentation titled Preparing Your Organization for Digital Business. And it looks like that's it, Eddie. That's a lot of questions, actually. When I'm looking at this, that was a lot of questions.
Well, that's a good thing. I didn't bore them, so I'm happy. I'm always concerned that I'm talking in one direction and not having any dialogue.
No, you're not. I told you earlier, you're very charismatic, and it's very engaging presentation. So you had us all paying attention for sure.
So that means you'll bring me back next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course. Anytime you would like to come and present.
All kidding around, I want to thank ITSM Academy and Karen, and I'm thanking the people that are on this call for listening to me and helping me share my story. I'm humbled and honored. Thank you.
And we really appreciate you sharing that story too. It was very important, and it's very personal. So thank you very much for sharing all of that information with us. Now what we're going to do is we're going to send an invitation to everybody for the next webinar, and we look forward to you having us join us then. And as you log out, please take a minute to complete the post-webinar survey, because that gives you the opportunity to request any webinar topics that you'd like to see presented in the future. And we do use that list when we're looking for topics for you. So that's very important for us. So please take a minute to do that. Very much appreciated. And as I said earlier, if you'd like to share your story with us, I'd be happy to help you do that. So just, let me know and be happy to help you with that and make that happen for you. And again, Eddie, thank you again so much. A lot of accolades coming in on the chat for you. So thank you very much for a very timely, very important presentation for us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And everybody have a great day, and I will talk to you next month. Take care.